Welcome back, survivors. Today, I'm sharing a confession that's been buried for over 2 centuries, a truth preserved in ice and steel beneath the Nevada wasteland. We're diving into one of the darkest pre-war conspiracies that most people never discovered, a program called Project Detention, where thousands of death row inmates were frozen instead of executed, stored in automated facilities that kept running long after the bombs fell. Let's begin this confession from Facility 19. My name is Marcus Webb, prisoner number 74329, and I woke up this morning to discover that I've been frozen for 213 years. The execution date on my file says October 15th, 2077. The calendar on the wall terminal reads January 9th, 2291. Everyone I knew is dead. Everyone I killed is dead. And somehow, I'm the one who gets to walk free in a world that doesn't remember my crimes because it has bigger problems than one armed robber who panicked and pulled the trigger twice. They told me it was mercy. 3 months before they were supposed to stick the needle in my arm, representatives from something called the Department of Corrections Innovation Initiative came to death row. Clean suits, cleaner smiles, and briefcases full of promises. They had an alternative to execution, they said. Cryogenic preservation for future rehabilitation, advanced correctional facilities that wouldn't exist for decades, neural reconstruction therapy, real reform instead of death, a chance at redemption when society had evolved past simple punishment. I was 28 years old and terrified of dying. When you're staring down execution, you'll believe anything that sounds like hope. The pitch was seductive. Maybe in 50 years there would be technology to fix what was broken in people like me. Maybe I could actually become someone different, someone better. They made it sound like I'd wake up in a world that understood rehabilitation instead of revenge. Every death row inmate in America got the same offer. 2,847 of us total. 2,809 accepted. Only 38 chose execution over the unknown. I used to think they were cowards for not taking the chance. Now I know they were the smart ones. They died quickly on dates they knew were coming. They didn't have to wake up to this. The transfer happened fast. 1 week, I was in my cell at Redgate Correctional in Ohio. The next, I was being loaded into a prison transport with 23 other death row inmates. They didn't tell us where we were going until we arrived. Facility 19, somewhere in the Nevada desert. The building looked like it had been swallowed by a mountain. Reinforced concrete walls 3 feet thick, blast doors that could survive a direct hit, and enough space underground to house thousands of people if necessary. They processed us like cattle. Medical examinations, psychological evaluations, endless paperwork that none of us really read. We were all too focused on not dying to care about the fine print. The facility staff were clinical, professional, distant. They treated us like specimens instead of people, which I suppose we were. Failed experiments in humanity waiting to be put on ice. The cryogenic pods were arranged in neat rows inside what they called the preservation chamber. 45 units in my section alone. Each pod looked like a metal coffin stood upright, with a small window at face level and enough room inside for one person standing straight. The technology was military grade, they told us, used by the armed forces for long-term medical suspension. Perfectly safe, perfectly tested. They'd wake us up when the world was ready for us. The worst part was being conscious during the freeze process. They couldn't just put you under because the cryogenic suspension required your body to shut down in a specific sequence. You had to be awake when the temperature dropped, when your blood turned to slush, when your thoughts started moving like honey poured in winter. I remember trying to scream and feeling my jaw lock halfway through. I remember the panic of suffocation even though I knew I wasn't breathing. I remember consciousness fading but never quite disappearing, like falling asleep but never reaching the dream. Then, nothing. No sense of time passing, no dreams, no thoughts, no existence, just nothing. And then the alarm. The emergency lighting was the first thing I noticed when consciousness came back. Red strobing lights that hurt my eyes even through closed lids. Then the sound, klaxons blaring, mechanical voices announcing system failures, the hiss of pressure seals releasing. My pod door swung open and I fell forward onto metal grating, gasping like I'd been underwater for hours. Every muscle in my body screamed. My skin felt wrong, like it belonged to someone else. I couldn't remember my name for the first 30 seconds. The preservation chamber was exactly as I remembered it. Same metal walls, same arrangement of pods, same 45 units standing in their neat rows. But something was different. The lights were dimmer, there was dust on everything, and most importantly, I was the only one awake. 44 other pods, all still sealed, all still occupied. I could see faces through the small windows, frozen men and women, eyes closed, skin pale as paper. My fellow death row inmates, still waiting for the future that was supposed to save them, still suspended in that horrible, not quite death that I'd just escaped. I found the control terminal near the exit. The screen was ancient, one of those old green text displays that the military loved so much. But it still worked. The automated systems had been running for over 2 centuries, powered by something the logs called a long-term nuclear battery with a 500-year operational lifespan. Everything was categorized, indexed, time-stamped. Everything was documented. That's when I learned the truth about Project Detention. The program was never about rehabilitation. The pitch about advanced correctional facilities and neural reconstruction was pure fiction. They'd frozen us because executing 2,800 death row inmates before the war would have been politically impossible. The optics were bad, the cost was high, the public outcry would have been enormous, so they froze us instead and planned to deal with it later. Later never came. The bombs fell on October 23rd, 2077, 6 months after they froze me, 6 weeks before my original execution date. The facility staff had approximately 12 minutes of warning before the first warheads hit. They evacuated to designated emergency shelters and never came back. The automated systems took over, sealing the facility, maintaining the pods, waiting for instructions that would never arrive. I've spent the past 18 hours reading every file in the system. The master database contains locations and statistics for all 47 facilities in Project Detention. Facility 1 has 347 inmates. Facility 2 has 198. Facility 47 has 84. All still operational, all still powered, all still maintaining their frozen prisoners across what used to be the United States of America. The automated revival system was programmed for staggered releases. 1 inmate per facility per decade, scheduled based on psychological profiles and rehabilitation potential ratings. The system was supposed to slowly reintroduce death row inmates to society in manageable numbers once civilization rebuilt itself. Except civilization didn't rebuild. The world ended, and the machines just kept following their programming like nothing had changed. I'm the first person to wake at Facility 19 since the bombs fell. According to the schedule, my pod was supposed to open in 2287. The system initiated early because of critical power fluctuations and automatic safety protocols. The next scheduled revival isn't until 2297. 10 years from now. Pod 12. A man named Richard Soto, convicted of killing his wife and her parents in a fit of rage. After him, Pod 28 in 2307. Then Pod 6 in 2317. The system will keep waking people up one by one, decade after decade, until the battery finally dies. If you're still with me after hearing this, hit that like and subscribe button. My psychological profile is still in the system. Moderate rehabilitation potential, it says. Nonviolent history prior to incident. Crime of panic rather than premeditation. Demonstrated remorse during trial. That's why my pod was programmed to open first instead of the serial killers in pods 12 through 19. The system determined I was the safest bet for successful reintegration into society. What the system didn't account for was that there's no society left to reintegrate into. I found my case file in the personnel records. Reading it felt like watching someone else's life. The robbery happened on March 14th, 2076, at a convenience store in Columbus, Ohio. I needed money for rent. My girlfriend was pregnant. I'd lost my job at the steel mill 2 months earlier when they automated the assembly line. I was desperate, stupid, and armed with my grandfather's pistol that I barely knew how to use. Michael and Jennifer Ramirez, 32 and 29 years old. They came into the store while I had the gun pointed at the clerk. Michael tried to be a hero. He moved toward me, hands up, voice calm, trying to talk me down. I panicked. The gun went off. Jennifer screamed and ran for the door. The gun went off again. The file notes that both deaths were instantaneous, which was supposed to make me feel better about it. It doesn't. The clerk survived because he had the sense to stay behind the counter. He testified at my trial, said I stood there for almost a minute afterward, gun hanging loose in my hand, staring at what I'd done like I couldn't believe it was real. He said I was crying when the police arrived. He said I kept apologizing to the bodies. They found me guilty in 40 minutes. Death penalty in a state that rarely used it anymore. The judge said my actions demonstrated a fundamental disregard for human life. My public defender said we were lucky they didn't charge it as domestic terrorism given the political climate. I was 28 years old and I'd thrown my entire life away because I was scared and stupid and holding a gun. The Ramirez family gave victim impact statements. Jennifer's mother talked about her daughter's laugh. Michael's father talked about the grandchildren who would never exist. Someone brought pictures. Michael coaching Little League, Jennifer at her college graduation. Normal people living normal lives until I decided their money was worth more than their existence. I deserved to die. I knew it then, and I know it now. But I was also terrified, so when Vault-Tec's representatives came with their offer of cryogenic preservation, I took it. I told myself it was about redemption. Really, it was just cowardice with extra steps. The facility has enough supplies to last one person approximately 5 years if rationed carefully. After that, I'll need to venture outside to scavenge or hunt or whatever people do in this wasteland world I've woken into. The main exit leads to a reinforced tunnel that surfaces 3 miles from the facility entrance. The secondary exit is for emergencies only, directly into the maintenance sublevel that connects to the old highway system. I found weapons in the armory, nothing fancy. Riot shotguns, tactical pistols, body armor designed for correctional officers. There's also a full set of maps showing every other facility location in Project Detention. Someone planned for the possibility of facility-to-facility transport. Someone thought maybe they'd need to move prisoners between locations. Someone left behind a complete roadmap to 2,800 frozen criminals. Here's what keeps me awake. Pod 23 doesn't contain a death row inmate. The file says, Senator Williams classified as future project participant, frozen for sedition against Project Safe House. Sedition wasn't even a capital crime. He was an elected official who opposed Vault-Tec's government contracts, and suddenly he's frozen in a criminal detention facility with murderers and rapists. Pod 37 is another one. Dr. Elizabeth Chen, classified as future project participant, frozen for conspiracy to distribute classified information. Her file notes that she worked as a researcher for Vault-Tec and discovered something about the company's real purpose. She tried to go public. 2 weeks later, she was arrested, convicted in a closed trial, and frozen. There are 14 pods in this facility alone that contain political prisoners disguised as criminals. People who opposed Vault-Tec, people who knew too much, people who asked the wrong questions. The system froze them right alongside actual murderers because nobody would question why death row inmates were being shipped off to experimental detention facilities. It was the perfect cover. I've been reading the psychological profiles of everyone in this facility. Some are like me. One terrible mistake made in desperation or panic. crimes that deserved punishment, but maybe not death. Pod 7 is a woman named Sarah Martinez who killed her abusive husband after 15 years of torture. Pod 18 is a kid barely 20 years old who was the driver in a robbery where his friend shot someone. Pod 29 is a man who provided euthanasia to his dying mother in a state where it was still illegal. But others are true monsters. Pod 12 is Richard Soto, mentioned earlier. He didn't just kill his wife and in-laws in a fit of rage. He planned it for weeks, took out life insurance policies, arranged perfect alibis. He was caught because he couldn't resist bragging about it online. Pod 15 is Marcus DeLeon, serial rapist with 17 confirmed victims. Pod 19 is someone the file just calls the Butcher of Reno. No real name listed, 36 murders over 8 years. The cruelest part is that I now have power over all of them. The master control terminal can manually activate any pod in this facility. I could wake them all up right now if I wanted to. I could let them out one by one like the system planned, or I could leave them frozen forever. Let them sleep through whatever remains of human history until the batteries finally die and the pods fail and they drift away into permanent death without ever knowing they'd been given centuries of extra life. What right do I have to make that choice? I'm a murderer just like them. My victims are just as dead as theirs. The only difference is I got lucky enough to be frozen first, to wake up first, to have this horrible decision dumped in my lap. I've been exploring the facility, trying to avoid thinking about it. The living quarters are tiny but functional. Bed, toilet, sink, small storage locker. The cafeteria is stocked with freeze-dried rations that will probably outlast me. The medical bay has enough supplies to handle basic injuries. The recreation room has books, board games, a television connected to nothing. Someone thought about what life would be like for the staff here. They just didn't plan for death row inmates to be living in it. The terminal logs show that the facility operated normally for exactly 6 months and 4 days. Staff rotations every 2 weeks, regular maintenance checks, quarterly psychological evaluations of the frozen prisoners somehow, though I'm not sure how you evaluate someone who's unconscious. Everything by the book until October 23rd, 2077, when the world ended. The last entry is from Facility Director Nathaniel Cross. He was supposed to be here for another 6 days, but the emergency broadcast came through at 10:47 in the morning. Nuclear launches detected worldwide, estimated impact in 12 minutes. All personnel evacuate to designated shelters immediately. He wrote a final log entry saying he was sealing the facility and activating automated systems. He wrote that he hoped someone would eventually return to shut everything down properly. He wrote that God forgive them all for what they'd done. Nobody ever came back. The facility sealed itself and just kept running like nothing had changed. Maintaining temperature, recycling air, monitoring pod functions, waiting for instructions from a government that no longer existed, to process prisoners for a justice system that had burned away in nuclear fire. I found where Director Cross kept his personal files. He had a wife and 2 daughters, pictures on his desk. Sarah, Emma, and little Rachel, who was only 6 years old. He had theater tickets for November, a vacation planned for December, a mortgage payment due on the 15th. He had a normal life, and then he had 12 minutes to decide whether to stay with his prisoners or run for shelter with everyone else. He ran. I don't blame him. I would have run too, but that doesn't change the fact that he left us here, left us frozen and helpless while the world burned, left the machines to decide our fate, left me to wake up alone in a tomb filled with people who deserve to stay dead. The radiation levels outside are still elevated, but survivable according to the environmental monitors. The world didn't end completely. People survived. Civilization survived in some form. I've picked up radio signals occasionally, nothing clear, just fragments of conversations in languages I recognize and some I don't. There are people out there, communities, factions, whatever came after. If this story has kept You listening this far and you want more of these dark confessions from the Wasteland? Hit that like button. It really motivates me to create similar Fallout lores, and that means Michael and Jennifer Ramirez died in the nuclear fire while I slept safely in a government facility designed to preserve the very worst people America had to offer. Their families burned, their friends burned, everyone who mourned them burned. But I got to skip the apocalypse entirely because I was too valuable as experimental data to let die on schedule. The weight of that irony is crushing. I was sentenced to death for taking 2 lives. The world executed billions while I floated in cryogenic nothing. Whoever dropped those bombs killed more people in an afternoon than every death row inmate in history combined. And yet, here I am, the one who gets to wake up and walk free in whatever's left. I've been going through the supply manifests, trying to understand what Project Detention was really supposed to accomplish. The facilities are overbuilt for simple prisoner storage, too much redundancy, too many backup systems, nuclear batteries that last 5 centuries, air filtration that could run for 1,000 years, radiation shielding thick enough to survive direct hits. This wasn't designed as temporary storage. This was designed to outlast civilization itself. The clue was in a classified memo buried in the administrative files. Project Detention was originally proposed by Vault-Tec in 2073 as part of their broader social experiment initiative. They sold it to the Department of Corrections as a humane alternative to execution, but the real purpose was testing long-term cryogenic suspension on unwilling subjects. Death row inmates were the perfect test population. No one would miss us. No one would advocate for us. We could be frozen for decades, and if the technology failed, well, we were supposed to die anyway. Vault-Tec wanted to perfect cryogenic preservation for their vault experiments. They needed data on how human bodies responded to centuries of suspension. They needed to know if people could be frozen and thawed repeatedly without brain damage. They needed test subjects who wouldn't be mourned if something went wrong. We were lab rats with prison numbers instead of names. The memo explicitly states that Project Detention was intended to run for a minimum of 200 years, long enough to gather meaningful data on extended suspension, long enough to test the limits of the technology, long enough that everyone who might object to the experiment would be dead themselves. We weren't being preserved for rehabilitation, we were being preserved for research. I found the related project files in the database. Project Detention was linked to something called Societal Preservation Program, multiple facilities running parallel experiments, some testing isolation, some testing resource scarcity, some testing authority structures. Project Detention was testing whether you could keep a population frozen indefinitely and revive them in controlled numbers to populate experimental communities. The staggered revival schedule makes sense now. Wake one person every 10 years, integrate them into whatever society exists, monitor their adaptation, collect data, repeat. We were supposed to be a controlled variable in someone's grand social experiment. Living time capsules released one by one into the wasteland to see what happened. Except the experiment failed before it began. Vault-Tec's researchers are probably dead. The Enclave scientists who funded this are probably dead. The government officials who approved it are definitely dead. Nobody's left to collect the data or analyze the results or care whether we adapt successfully to post-apocalyptic life. The machines are still following their programming, but there's no one left to receive the reports. I am a failed experiment that succeeded in the worst possible way. The technology worked perfectly. I survived 213 years of suspension and woke up healthy and sane. But the entire framework around the experiment collapsed, leaving me trapped in a facility full of frozen criminals with no oversight, no guidance, and no purpose beyond existing. The database has detailed files on every prisoner in every facility. I've been reading them obsessively, trying to understand who these people were, trying to decide if they deserve the mercy of continued sleep or the horror of waking up to what the world has become. Facility 8 has someone I recognize, James Patterson. He was famous before the war, the Appalachian Strangler, killed 12 hikers over 3 years, buried their bodies in the mountains, evaded capture until a park ranger noticed the pattern. His trial was televised. His execution was supposed to be televised too, one of those public spectacles meant to demonstrate justice being served. Instead, he's frozen in a pod in Kentucky, scheduled to wake in 2315. Facility 23 has Victoria Lang, the Vault-Tec whistleblower. She worked in their research division and discovered that certain vaults were deliberately designed to fail. She tried to leak the information to the press. They arrested her for espionage, terrorism, and sedition. She's frozen alongside rapists and murderers because she tried to save people from Vault-Tec's experiments. Facility 36 has Marcus Holloway, 17 years old when they froze him, convicted as an adult for killing a police officer during a protest that turned into a riot. The file notes that he maintained his innocence throughout the trial. The file also notes that several witnesses recanted their testimony after conviction but before sentencing. It doesn't matter now. He's been frozen for 200 years for a crime he may not have committed. Every file is a tragedy. Every pod contains someone's son or daughter or parent or friend. People who made terrible choices or were victims of terrible circumstances or just happened to be inconvenient for someone powerful. All of us frozen because death was politically complicated and storage was cheap. I keep coming back to the manual override controls, 3 key presses, and I could wake everyone in this facility. 44 people suddenly thrust into a world they don't understand. Or I could wake them selectively, save the political prisoners, and leave the monsters frozen, play judge and jury and executioner for people who've already been sentenced. But what right do I have? My victims are just as dead as anyone else's. I killed 2 people because I was scared and desperate and stupid. Some of the people in these pods killed because they enjoyed it. Some killed to survive. Some killed because they were forced to. Some didn't kill at all but ended up here anyway. Who am I to decide which crimes deserve a second chance and which deserve eternal sleep? The radiation outside is survivable, but the world is dangerous. I've monitored enough radio chatter to understand that. Raiders, mutated creatures, desperate communities fighting over scraps, released prisoners would be walking into a nightmare with no preparation, no allies, no resources. It might be kinder to leave them frozen, but maybe some of them deserve that nightmare. Maybe walking through a destroyed world is appropriate punishment for what we did. Maybe facing the consequences of humanity's worst impulses made manifest is exactly what death row inmates need to experience. We killed people in the old world. Now we get to inherit the world that killed everyone. There's a manifest in the supply room that I initially ignored. Personal effects. Every prisoner's belongings sealed in storage containers, indexed by pod number. I found mine. 1 cardboard box with my name and number stenciled on the side. I haven't opened it yet. I'm not sure I want to. Inside that box is the necklace I bought for my girlfriend before I lost my job. The one I was trying to keep from being repossessed when I decided robbing a convenience store was a good idea. Inside that box are pictures of people who died in nuclear fire. Inside that box is evidence of a life I threw away for $347 that I never got to spend because I panicked and killed 2 innocent people first. Pod 7 contains Sarah Martinez, the woman who killed her abusive husband. Her personal effects include 15 years of medical records documenting broken bones, concussions, internal injuries. Also included is a wedding photo where she's smiling but not with her eyes. Also included is a note she wrote to herself that just says survive. She killed him in self-defense after he put her in the hospital for the 3rd time that year. The jury didn't believe her, said she could have left, said real victims would have run. Now she's frozen next to people who killed for pleasure or profit or politics. Because the justice system in 2076 didn't understand trauma or domestic violence or the psychology of abuse. Because killing your attacker was still murder, even if waiting would have meant your own death. Because the law cared more about rules than circumstances. I could wake her right now, give her a chance at freedom in a world where her abuser is long dead and no one remembers her crime. But then I'd have to explain that the world ended, that everyone she knew is gone, that she survived her husband only to sleep through humanity's near extinction. Would that be mercy or cruelty? The same question applies to everyone here. Pod 18 contains Eric Tomas, 20 years old when they froze him. He was the driver during a robbery that went wrong. His friend shot the store clerk. Eric didn't even know his friend had a gun. They charged him with felony murder anyway. He's been frozen since 2075, 16 years old when he made the worst decision of his life. Now he's spent 2 centuries in suspended animation for the crime of trusting the wrong person. Pod 29 contains Dr. Robert Chen, brother to Elizabeth, who's in Pod 37. He helped his mother die after cancer ravaged her body and the insurance companies denied her pain management. Physician-assisted suicide was illegal in their state. They called it first-degree murder. His medical license was revoked. His reputation was destroyed. Then they froze him and pretended it was justice. The monsters are here too. I'm not ignoring them. Pod 15 is Marcus DeLeon, 17 confirmed rapes. DNA evidence linked him to 34 more. He kept trophies, photographs, recording devices. He enjoyed it. The file notes he showed no remorse during trial or sentencing. He laughed when they read the death penalty verdict. Pod 19 is the Butcher of Reno. No real name in any file. Just a designation. 36 murders over 8 years. Ritualistic, methodical. The file contains crime scene photos that I had to close immediately. Some people are broken beyond repair. Some people proved they don't deserve to exist in any world, apocalyptic or otherwise. So I'm faced with an impossible choice. Wake everyone and let them find their own way in the wasteland. Wake some and leave others frozen. Leave them all sleeping until the batteries die in 300 years. Or find the courage to manually terminate the pods and give them the death sentences they were originally promised. I've been here for 3 days now. 3 days of reading files and monitoring radio signals and trying to understand what kind of world I've inherited. 3 days of staring at those 44 pods and wondering which faces behind those windows deserve mercy and which deserve oblivion. The terminal has a broadcast function. I can send signals to every other facility in Project Detention. I can wake up all 2,800 prisoners simultaneously. Release every killer, rapist, and political prisoner into the wasteland at once. 2,800 desperate people suddenly thrust into a world that has no use for them. It would be chaos. It would be catastrophic. It would also be their choice instead of mine. Or I could send the termination code. Shut down life support across all 47 facilities. Let everyone drift away in their sleep. No pain. No horror of waking to destroyed world. Just peaceful, nothing extending forever. It would be murder on a scale that would make my original crime look microscopic. It would also be the most merciful thing I could do for them. I've been standing at this terminal for 6 hours trying to find the courage to press one button or another. Broadcast activation, mass termination, individual selection. Every option feels like playing God with people who've already been judged by a system that no longer exists. The facility has observation cameras for each pod. I can see their faces if I want to. Frozen expressions caught mid-breath when the suspension activated. Some look peaceful, some look terrified. Pod 12 shows Richard Soto with his eyes half open, mouth twisted in what might be a scream or might be nothing at all. Pod 7 shows Sarah Martinez with tears frozen on her cheeks. Pod 23 shows Senator Williams looking defiant even in suspended animation. I activated the camera for my own pod out of morbid curiosity. The footage is archived. I watched myself being loaded into the chamber, watched the fear in my eyes as they sealed the door, watched my face go slack as the temperature dropped and consciousness faded. I looked so young, 28 years old, and convinced I was choosing life over death. I had no idea I was choosing to sleep through the end of everything. There's a psychological evaluation in my file from the week before they froze me. The counselor noted that I exhibited strong guilt responses and genuine remorse for my actions. She wrote that I had potential for rehabilitation if given proper therapy and time. She recommended cognitive behavioral therapy, trauma counseling, and restorative justice programs. None of that happened. They just froze me instead and called it innovation. The same counselor evaluated Sarah Martinez. She noted severe PTSD, defensive trauma responses, and recommended immediate transfer to a psychiatric facility rather than death row. The recommendation was denied. Policy stated that killing your spouse was first-degree murder regardless of circumstances. No exceptions, no consideration for 15 years of documented abuse, just guilt and punishment and a pod with her name on it. I wonder if that counselor survived the war. I wonder if she thinks about us sometimes, the prisoners she evaluated, knowing they'd be frozen indefinitely. I wonder if she felt guilty for participating in an experiment disguised as mercy. Or maybe she's just dead like almost everyone else and it doesn't matter anymore. The facility has a chapel. I found it. On the third sublevel, non-denominational, rows of chairs facing a simple altar, books from every major religion stacked on shelves along the walls. Someone thought the staff would need spiritual guidance working in a place like this. Someone understood that watching over frozen criminals for years at a time might damage the soul. I sat in that chapel for 2 hours trying to pray. I'm not religious, never was, but faced with this choice, I wanted guidance from something bigger than myself. I wanted someone to tell me what to do. God stayed silent. The books offered philosophy, but no answers. I'm alone with this decision. Here's what I keep coming back to. The people in these pods didn't ask to be frozen. We were given a choice between execution and suspension, but it wasn't really a choice. It was desperation packaged as mercy. We were promised rehabilitation in a better future. Instead, we got used as test subjects for technology that outlived its purpose. We're victims of Vault-Tec's experiments just like everyone else in their twisted program. The difference is, our crimes were real. We actually killed people or hurt people or threatened the system. We deserved punishment. But did we deserve to be frozen for centuries while the world burned? Did we deserve to become science experiments for a corporation that saw human lives as data points? I don't know. I truly don't know. And that uncertainty is paralyzing. The radio picked up something interesting an hour ago. 2 people talking about a settlement somewhere to the east. They mentioned food supplies, clean water, defensible walls. They mentioned accepting newcomers if they could prove they weren't raiders or mutants. They mentioned trying to rebuild something resembling civilization. If I wake the others, that's where I'd send them. Give them coordinates and supplies and a chance to find community in the wasteland. Some would make it, some wouldn't. Some would turn raider themselves or get killed or give up. But at least they'd have a choice. At least they'd get to live or die by their own actions instead of machines following programming written before the world ended. But then I think about Marcus de Leon in Pod 15, about the Butcher of Reno in Pod 19, about all the true monsters who earned their death sentences through systematic cruelty. Would that settlement welcome them? Would they deserve the chance to hurt people in this new world the way they hurt people in the old one? The answer is no. Obviously, no. Some crimes are unforgivable. Some people are irredeemable. The world has enough horrors without releasing serial rapists and mass murderers into it. So maybe I wake some and leave others frozen. Save the Sarah Martinezes and Eric Tomases and Dr. Chens. Leave the De Leons and Sotos and nameless butchers to sleep forever. Split the difference between mercy and justice. But who decides where that line is? Me? A armed robber who killed 2 people because he was scared? What moral authority do I have to judge which crimes deserve second chances? I'm not better than them. I'm just luckier. My pod opened first, and now I have power I never asked for and don't deserve. There's one more file I haven't mentioned. Pod 45, the last one in this facility. The file is heavily redacted. No name, no crime, just a designation, Specimen 0 Alpha, high value asset. Do not terminate under any circumstances. Special handling required upon revival. Someone in this facility isn't a criminal at all. Someone is here for reasons that were classified even before the world ended. Someone important enough that Vault-Tec marked them as absolutely essential to whatever plan they had for after the bombs fell. I could wake them up first, ask them what this was all about, get answers about Project Detention and Vault-Tec and why we were really frozen, or I could leave them sleeping and never know, never understand the full truth about what was done to us. The curiosity is overwhelming, but so is the fear. What if Specimen 0 Alpha is dangerous? What if they're the architect of this whole program? What if waking them up is exactly what I'm not supposed to do? I'm running out of time to decide. The supplies will only last so long. Eventually, I'll have to leave this facility and venture into the wasteland. And when I do, I'll either go alone, knowing I left everyone behind, or I'll go having made a choice that will haunt me forever. The terminal is still waiting. 3 options glowing on the screen. Activate all. Terminate all. Individual selection. My finger hovers over the keyboard and I can't make it press down. I made my decision at dawn on the 4th day, not because I found moral clarity or divine guidance or even logical certainty. I decided because I couldn't stand the paralysis anymore, because inaction is itself a choice, and I refuse to let cowardice disguised as caution define me twice in one lifetime. I'm waking them, all of them, the innocent and the guilty, the victims and the monsters. Everyone gets the same chance I got. Everyone gets to open their eyes in a destroyed world and decide what to do with their second life. I refuse to play God. I refuse to be the arbiter of who deserves mercy and who deserves oblivion. But I'm not stupid. I'm doing it strategically, 1 per day over the next 44 days, starting with the political prisoners and victims of circumstance, ending with the true monsters. That gives the decent people time to establish themselves, gather supplies, maybe form alliances before the predators wake up. It's not much of an advantage, but it's something. I started with Pod 23, Senator Williams. He opened his eyes, confused and terrified, exactly like I did. I gave him water and explained carefully what year it is, what happened to the world, what we are and where we are and why we're alive. He cried for 20 minutes. Then he asked if he could help with the others. I said yes. Pod 37 came next. Dr. Elizabeth Chen. She processed the information faster than Williams did, asked technical questions about the suspension process, the facility, the automated systems. Then she asked if her brother was here too. I told her about Pod 29. She cried too, but quietly, controlled. She's a scientist. She compartmentalizes. Pod 7. Sarah Martinez. She woke up swinging, defensive instincts overriding everything else. It took both Williams and Chen to calm her down. When she finally understood she was free, that her husband was dead, that no one could hurt her anymore, she collapsed. We let her rest for 6 hours before explaining the rest. She's tough, tougher than any of us. She'll survive the wasteland better than most. Pod 29. Dr. Robert Chen. He and his sister held each other for an hour without speaking. Then they started asking questions about medical supplies, survival equipment, what we knew about the world outside. They're already planning, already thinking about how to help people. Some instincts survive even cryogenic suspension. Pod 18 came next. Eric Tomas. He's technically 36 years old now, but he was frozen at 20 and his mind is still 20. Still a kid who made one terrible mistake. Williams has taken him under his wing, teaching him about the world, about responsibility, about second chances. It's redemption for both of them. We've established a routine over these past 15 days. Someone wakes up. We explain. We give them time to process. We show them the supplies and the weapons and the maps. We offer them a choice: stay here in the facility with us or leave immediately for the Wasteland. Most choose to stay, at least temporarily. We're building something here, a community of broken people trying to figure out how to be human again. Not everyone adapts well. Pod 11 contained Marcus Reynolds, convicted of vehicular manslaughter while driving drunk. He woke up, learned the world had ended, and immediately found the supply of alcohol the facility staff had stashed. He drank himself unconscious and hasn't been sober since. We're letting him work through it, but he's running out of time. When the monsters wake up, we'll need everyone functional. Pod 16 was Amanda Shore, corporate espionage for a competitor of Vault-Tec. She was frozen for stealing research data. She's brilliant, manipulative, and utterly amoral. She tried to seize control of the facility within 12 hours of waking. Williams and Martinez shut her down hard. She's cooperating now, but I don't trust her. She sees opportunity in the Wasteland, sees power in chaos. She'll be gone within a week. We're up to 23 people awake now. The facility feels alive for the first time since I opened my eyes. Voices in the hallways, arguments over food distribution, planning sessions about what happens when we've woken everyone. It's chaotic and messy and sometimes hostile, but it's also human. We're making decisions together, instead of letting machines decide for us. Senator Williams wants to establish democratic governance, hold elections for leadership positions, create rules and systems for managing resources. He's trying to rebuild civilization starting with 44 death row inmates in a secret facility. It's idealistic and probably doomed, but I admire the attempt. Dr. Elizabeth Chen wants to contact the other facilities, use the broadcast system to coordinate mass revival across all 47 locations. She argues we'll have better chances of survival in larger numbers. She's probably right, but the logistics are overwhelming. 2,800 prisoners waking up simultaneously across the Wasteland. Some near settlements, some in wilderness, some in areas still too radioactive to survive. It could work. It could also be catastrophic. Sarah Martinez just wants to leave. She's been here 20 days and she's restless. The walls remind her of prison. The locked doors remind her of captivity. She wants open sky and freedom, even if it comes with radiation and raiders. Several others agree with her. They're planning to leave together once we've woken everyone. Safety, in numbers for the journey east, to that settlement we keep hearing about on the radio. I've been monitoring the radio signals constantly. The settlement is real. It's called Junction 7. Built in the ruins of what used to be a highway interchange, they have agriculture, water purification, trading networks. They're suspicious of outsiders but willing to negotiate. If our people can reach them, they might have a real chance at survival. But we still have 21 pods to open, 21 people who don't know their world ended. And among them are the monsters, the ones who earned death not through desperation or circumstance, but through deliberate cruelty. Marcus DeLeon, the butcher of Reno, Richard Soto, who planned his family's murder for weeks, others whose crimes I can barely read without feeling sick. Williams wants to wake them last and immediately exile them with minimal supplies. Martinez wants to wake them and execute them properly this time. Chen wants to leave them frozen and focus on saving the others. Amanda Shore, predictably, wants to wake them and recruit them, says the Wasteland needs predators and we should be smart enough to aim them at our enemies. We're voting tomorrow. Democratic process like Williams wanted. 23 voices deciding the fate of 21 sleeping monsters. Whatever we choose, I'll have to live with it. We all will. Here's what I've learned over these 3 weeks. Redemption isn't something you achieve. It's something you pursue knowing you'll never fully reach it. Michael and Jennifer Ramirez are still dead, My crime is still real, but I can choose what to do with the life I accidentally kept. I can choose to help people who deserve second chances. I can choose to face the consequences of living when everyone I wronged is gone. The others are learning the same lesson. Sarah Martinez carries guilt for killing even though it was self-defense. Eric Tomas carries guilt for trusting the wrong person. The Chen siblings carry guilt for choices made under impossible circumstances. We're all broken in different ways. We're all trying to figure out if broken people can build something whole. Pod 45 still sits sealed. Specimen 0 Alpha, high value asset. I told the others about it. Williams wants to wake them immediately. Chen wants to study the file more thoroughly first. Martinez doesn't care. Shore wants to use them as leverage somehow. We haven't decided yet. Part of me wants to leave that pod sealed forever. Let whoever's inside stay sleeping. They represent something bigger than individual crimes. They represent Vault-Tec's grand plan, whatever that was. They represent the conspiracy that turned death row inmates into research subjects. They represent questions I'm not sure I want answered. But another part of me needs to know. Needs to understand what Project Detention was really about. Needs to face the truth about what was done to us and why. Needs closure even if the closure is ugly. Tomorrow we wake Pod 31. Then Pod 33. Then we start the countdown to the monsters. 4 more days until Marcus de Leon opens his eyes. 6 more days until the Butcher of Reno. 7 days until Richard Soto. And then we'll see if our community of broken people can handle the presence of truly evil ones. The Wasteland radio is getting clearer. We're picking up multiple settlements now. Junction 7 to the east, New Reno to the west, something called the Mojave Network to the south. The world didn't end completely. Humanity survived in pockets, building new societies on the ruins of the old. We could join them, contribute something, maybe even thrive. If this confession meant something to you, leave a like. It's the only way I know you liked the video. I've been Marcus Webb, prisoner 74329 for 28 years. I've been specimen 74329, experimental subject in Project Detention for 213 years. Now I'm just Marcus trying to figure out what it means to be human in a world that forgot what humanity was supposed to look like. The terminal is still here. The broadcast function still works. I could send activation codes to all 47 facilities right now. Wake everyone simultaneously. 2,800 second chances. 2,800 people who thought they'd die in their old world getting the opportunity to live in this new one. Or I could send termination codes. End it all. Give them the peace they were originally promised. Save the wasteland from whatever chaos we represent. Or I could do nothing. Let each facility follow its own automated schedule. Let people wake one by one over centuries. Let the machines decide like they've been deciding for 200 years. The choice is still mine. The power is still here, and I still don't know if I'm making the right decisions. But I'm making decisions. That has to count for something. The facility door opens tomorrow. Sarah Martinez and her group are leaving for Junction 7. They're taking supplies, weapons, maps to other facilities. They're going to spread the word. Tell people that Project Detention exists. Tell them that death row inmates are preserved in 47 locations across the wasteland. Tell them that someone needs to decide what to do about us. Maybe that's the answer. Maybe the choice shouldn't be mine alone. Maybe the people who survived the apocalypse deserve a say in whether death row criminals from before the war get to participate in building what comes after. I'm sending this message out on every frequency I can find, broadcasting on emergency channels and civilian channels and military channels, telling our story, explaining what we are and where we came from and what we represent, asking the wasteland to help us decide what justice looks like in a world that's already been destroyed. If you're out there listening, if you survived the bombs and the radiation and the chaos, if you're trying to rebuild something resembling civilization, we need your guidance. We're death row inmates from America. We were frozen before the Great War. We're waking up now, and we don't know if we deserve to be part of whatever you're building. Tell us, please, tell us if criminals from the old world have a place in the new one. Tell us if redemption is possible, or if we should accept the death sentences we escaped through accident of timing. Tell us what justice means when the entire justice system is gone. I'm Marcus Webb. I killed 2 people in 2076. I've been given 213 extra years of life I didn't earn, and I'm trying to figure out what to do with it. This is my confession. This is my testimony. This is my plea for guidance in a world that no longer has answers. The terminal is waiting. The broadcast button is ready. Tomorrow, the Wasteland will know we exist, and then we'll see if they let us join them or if they decide death row inmates should have stayed dead after all.